welcome to Diecast Restos. I'm Jason and this is a model of the McLaren M23 Formula 1 car by POLISTIL. The RJ series it is part of was first released in 1976, with models in 1 in 55 and 1 in 66 scales. It would have come with a full Marlboro livery that replicated Emerson Fittipaldi's 1975 number 1 car. I could be wrong, but I think that the liveries may have been supplied as stickers when brand new for owners to apply themselves. Today I'm going to give it a slightly different livery using this set from Diecast. Again, a predominantly white car, I will be giving it a livery from 1974 and the number 33, as driven by motorcycle world champion Mike Hailwood for the first 11 races of that season. Getting into the model proved difficult. The plastic was very flexible until it wasn't anymore. I will sort that out when it comes to reassembly later on. As this is my first POLISTIL model, I thought that I would give you a bit of information about the Italian model maker. Originally named Politoys, they commenced production on a series of 100 1 in 41 scale plastic cars in the 1960s. They switched briefly to fiberglass before making the change to die-cast metal in 1964 or 65. Around this time saw the launch of their 1 in 43 scale M series, notable for its accurate replica models. Their 1 in 43 offerings were later sold under the E, EL and HE series. Then in 1967 they launched their 1 in 66 scale series designed to compete with Matchbox. The series never gained much popularity, so sales were generally restricted to Italy. In the early 70s, the company diversified their model offering further, with new focus on a larger 1 in 24 scale S series to compete with Martoys, later to become Burago. An even larger TG series in 1 in 16 scale were introduced in 1980, alongside the MS&MT 1 in 16 scale motorcycle range. The company also placed emphasis on racing car replicas, mostly of Formula 1 in various scales. The 1 in 32 F and FK series were first produced in 1970 and ran for a decade, replicating contemporary Grand Prix cars and amending wheel designs as the years progressed. The 1 in 41 CE series also produced a series of single-seaters, while the TG and L series reproduced them in 1 in 16 scale. The RJ series that this McLaren M23 forms part of carried 45 Grand Prix and Formula 1 models, and also extends to road and racing cars from other categories. Then in the 80s, they became a subsidiary of Tonka to produce 1 in 14 scale models that were now available in the US. They definitely had many fingers in many pies. However, Tonka's string of costly acquisitions meant that in 1991, Tonka was forced to find a buyer for itself in order to fund these dealings. Coinciding with a string of cost-saving exercises and an upturn in competition as demand for 1 in 18 scale grew, the POLISTIL name was dropped and Italian production ceased. In 2014, the brand name was revived by Maisto owner the Mei Chong Group. The sub-brand now offers slot cars, radio-controlled cars, and die-casts of construction machinery, tractors, and Formula 1 models. These are now manufactured in China rather than Italy. Now my RJ1 McLaren M23 model was released into the then brand new RJ series in 1976. Its livery loosely resembled the 1975 car, with a prominent red covering the tops of the side pods to forward of the cockpit just past the front axle. The rear wing had Texaco and Marlboro branding, but this was the only sponsorship. A red number 1 was affixed to the side pod sides and on the nose cone, therefore reflecting the car driven by reigning world champion Emerson Fittipaldi. He had driven the M23 to victory in 1974 in both the Drivers' and Constructors' Championships. The M23 had first been used competitively during the 1973 Formula 1 campaign. Developed from McLaren's M16 Indianapolis 500 car, it was teamed with a Ford Cosworth DFV engine which produced around 490 brake horsepower. Denny Holmes scored pole position in its debut outing at the South African Grand Prix, but would ultimately finish in 5th place. He would achieve the M23's first win at the Swedish Grand Prix as the team racked up 3 victories in the car's opening campaign. The car was developed further for 1974, as the team welcomed 1972 World Champion Fittipaldi, who joined from Lotus. Interestingly, his joining meant a significant degree of sponsorship juggling was required, since his prominence brought in a lot of interest from brands wanting to get their names on the cars. Yardley of London, a personal care brand, were the existing sponsors of the team, and to placate them, a third works car was run in the Yardley livery, to be driven by 9-time motorcycle world champion Mike Hailwood, running the number 33. Hailwood had competed in Formula 1 during his motorcycle racing career, but had completed 2 full seasons with the Surtees team in 1972 and 73. The number 5 and 6 cars driven by Fittipaldi and Holm received the more lucrative Texaco and Marlboro sponsorship. At its debut race, the car dubbed M23B would win at the hands of Holm, while Fittipaldi accidentally switched off his ignition while challenging, leaving him out of the points. But the Brazilian didn't have to wait long for his maiden McLaren win, as he took victory at his home race in the following round. Hailwood had been consistent in the number 33 car, scoring points with 4th and 5th place in each race, before he took his best result of the season in round 3. While the 2 Marlboro McLarens finished outside of the points, Hailwood took a 3rd place finish. He scored no points in the next 4 races, and Holm would only muster 3 one-point finishes in his next 8. Fittipaldi, however, racked up the points, scoring a podium in Spain and his 2nd win in Belgium. Hailwood had a strong race at the Dutch Grand Prix. He came home 4th after matching Fittipaldi, who finished 3rd. Sadly, Hailwood's Formula 1 career ended when he sustained leg injuries in the German Grand Prix at the Nürburgring. His car landed badly after a jump. David Hobbs would drive the car for the next 2 races, and then Jochen Mass took his place after leaving the Surtees team. Neither driver would score any points. Fittipaldi would win the penultimate race of 1974 in a year that had been closely fought with Ferrari's Clay Regazzoni in particular, while his teammate Niki Lauda, Brabham's Carlos Reutemann, Tyrrell's Jody Scheckter, and Lotus's Ronnie Peterson had all collected victories. Both championships went down to the last race at Watkins Glen, with both Fittipaldi and Regazzoni neck and neck on 52 points in the drivers' standings. Regazzoni was out of form in the race and would eventually retire, leaving Fittipaldi to cruise home in 4th position. With Scheckter's retirement, it also meant McLaren picked up their first world championship since being formed as a team by Bruce McLaren a decade earlier. For 1975, Mass replaced Holm in the M23C. The season started well for Fittipaldi, who took victory at the Argentine Grand Prix. He collected 2nd place finishes at Sao Paulo and Monaco, but suffered a series of retirements and non-point scoring finishes. Jochen Mass picked up his first Formula 1 victory in Barcelona, and Fittipaldi earned his 2nd and final win of the year at Silverstone. He finished 19.5 points behind Niki Lauda, who achieved his first of 3 world championships. Ferrari comprehensively won the Constructors' Championship, 18.5 points ahead of Brabham and 19.5 clear of McLaren. Fittipaldi left the team to establish the Coppice car team alongside his brother Wilson. McLaren hired James Hunt, who had performed miracles at Hesketh in 1975. The M23D that he would drive during the controversial 1976 season sported mid-mounted air scoops either side of the roll bar, after tall airboxes had been outlawed ahead of the Spanish Grand Prix. That would be Hunt's first victory for McLaren, though he had been initially disqualified in post-race scrutineering. The result was returned after a complaint by McLaren was upheld. Hunt had suffered from poor reliability, retiring from 4 of the first 6 races of the season. By the time he picked up his 2nd win of the campaign in France, Lauda had a 29-point championship lead and was 38 points ahead of Hunt. The season was to drastically change after the 1976 German Grand Prix at the Nürburgring. This was where Lauda had his shocking crash, which spelt the end for Formula 1 racing at the Nordschleife. He suffered severe burns to his head and hands in the ensuing fireball. Ferrari boycotted the following Austrian Grand Prix over the FIA's perceived favouritism of Hunt, after his disqualification was overturned from the Spanish Grand Prix. Hunt only finished 4th at the Oostenrijk and then won the Dutch Grand Prix. Lauda made a surprise return to racing at the Italian Grand Prix just 2 races after his accident. He finished 4th in that race, while Hunt retired, leaving a 5-point gap in the championship between the pair. Hunt claimed his 5th and 6th wins of the season in Canada and the US to reduce the deficit to Lauda to just 3 points. The final race of the year was a very wet and foggy affair at Fuji, Japan. It had been a point of debate ahead of the event whether to start the race, but it eventually went ahead. Lauda, a vocal critic of the decision to go ahead, drove into the pits to withdraw on the second lap, saying, "My life is worth more than a title." Hunt would go on to claim 3rd place, enough to give him the championship by 1 point over Lauda. It was meant to be the swan song for the now 4-year-old M23, with the M26 being seen as the future. However, the new car proved troublesome, so the M23E was used during the early phases of 1977. It was still competitive, earning several pole positions and podium finishes before the team finally made the switch midway through the year. The M23 had racked up 16 wins, 2 drivers and 1 constructors championship during its lifespan. It continued to be used by customer teams during the 1977 and 78 seasons, but to no success. So here were the pieces that make up this POLISTIL piece. I first need to balance the axles onto slots designed for them on the underside of the casting. I then place the more realistic matte black instead of chrome plated engine piece into position, and then follow that up with the base. This is push fit over those very narrow posts, and I later add a little glue to secure the broken off piece as well. Here's how my rather plain looking McLaren M23 by POLISTIL looked before setting to work on giving it a new livery. I've collected a few of these models, and unlike more modern Formula 1 efforts from Hot Wheels and Matchbox, these appear to accurately reflect the car it is based on, instead of being a generic Formula 1 car with different decal designs. I especially appreciate the period correct extra wide rear tyres. But let's see how it looks race ready. As much as I like the first iteration of the iconic Marlboro McLaren livery, I think this Yardley livery with its handwritten driver name and wonky numbers really suits the car itself. They spice up an otherwise plain car with the added orange accents to the sides and nose cone. The decals are good, but they're clearly designed for bigger scales. The numbering system used for putting the yellow trim lines in the right places was completely unreadable. Other touches I've made include adding the Goodyear branding to the wheels, which I've also trimmed to make a bit bolder. And the engine is no longer chrome plated, but instead matte black with chrome highlights where necessary. So what did you make of the M23 history lesson and this Restomod? Have I done it justice? Let me know down in the comments, and leave a like if you enjoyed this, especially if you'd like to see more POLISTIL permutations. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you again for the next one. Bye for now.
Oh.